Vanillaware had a lot of critics in the past about them having very explicit artwork in their games. Like very women with revealing outfits, for example. They never went back on it. They had a lot of backlash and they never went back on it. I remember when the artist, which is one of the main directors, was criticized for the artwork by the American media. I think they replied by showing even more exaggerated figures. And when someone complained about sexism in the game because they showed a lot of cleverly dressed women, he went to Twitter and actually drew cleverly dressed men as well. He drew muscly naked men for the writers of the articles. So that was fun to see.
I love when authors and artists take a stand.
Yeah, and at that point, he's not even taking it to heart. He's taking it as a joke, you know? So it's like you're picking up something that someone is making a big deal out of it, and you're turning it into a joke.
Like you remember Yoko Taro from the Nier games?
Yeah, right. Well, he's a lot
you
like
remember all the controversy with the 2B, and the guy was like, it's a problem. There's a lot of Rule 34 images of 2B, so if you would be kind and zip all the images and send it to me, I would be thankful.
Yeah, I think he said something like I like women, that's about it. I like women. That's about it.
No, but besides that, he also said, oh yeah, sure, just be sure to save all the images and send them to me.
Yeah, I think
sad.
that's an amazing response.
That's amazing, man. I wish that there were more authors like that.
Yeah, but again, I don't think this would stop me from playing Unicorn Overlord. I think the only thing stopping me from playing it is that it's exclusive to consoles, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's a common problem.
Yeah, so we're going to have to wait and see, because as far as I know, I don't think they ever released a game on PC, except probably Dragon Crown. Yeah, you told me about that one. I don't think this game ever came to PC. Sadly, no, it didn't. It went to the PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, and PlayStation 4. So that's very sad.
It is.
Maybe we'll never see a game from these guys coming to the PC. But if we do,
I mean, if it becomes popular enough, we might be lucky.
This reminds me, there's an independent developer team in Japan called Inti Creates, which is an off-brand from Capcom. It's basically a team of people that used to work on the Mega Man games.
Okay.
They split off from Capcom and they started working on some Mega Man games by the order of Capcom, but they were relatively independent and they could put their own ideas into the games. And eventually they broke up from Capcom completely, so they don't work with them anymore. And they started publishing their own games, and their first game was Gunvolt. You can look it up if you want, Gunvolt. Like, the first game was so bad that I refunded it on Steam. Like, the translation was just that bad.
Damn, that bad?
Yeah, it was terrible, because not only is there a lot of lost context, because there's no English dub of the game, and the game was meant for you to listen to the characters, not to read their dialogue. So that's a huge issue. Start with.
Yeah, when you immediately see people asking about mods to fix the translations, you know the.
And I don't want to get into gender politics, but there's a specific character. You know, this game is about transformation, so each character transforms into like a robotic form of themselves when they're fighting. And one of those characters is I think it's a man, and he transforms into a girl. Or maybe it's the opposite. It's a girl and transforms into a robot man. And they refer to him as Zer in the translation. And during dialogue, they have this entire stretch of dialogue where essentially you're just explaining the nuances of gender to the audience as you're playing. To explain why you should treat them as Zer. And I'm like, you could just treat them by the pronouns
by the name.
You wish to call him. Yeah, call him or Zer, whatever you want to say. Like, I don't have an issue with that, but why are you stopping my game to explain to me gender politics? This is not what I'm playing the game
Yeah, exactly.
for.
Like, at that point, they're just pushing their agenda, because the Japanese for sure don't have that on their game. So at that point, you're just like, I'm going to simply distort this character into how I think it should be like.
Yeah, because as far as I know, it was never meant to be a big deal that he transformed into a girl, you know? Or that she transformed into a man. It was just part of it, you know? It was just the character gimmick. and they refer to him, I think, with neutral pronouns in Japanese, which is okay. And you could do the same in English. You could identify them with they. I don't think there's an issue with that. So you give them a neutral pronoun that you could use for any gender. But they invented a gender specifically for this character, which was not part of the original.
They're just pushing their agenda.
So they changed the entire logic of the game. Yeah, of the character. They tried to give him a huge backstory about how he identifies himself personally. Which is weird, right? Because it's not part of the game. Why are you adding this?
No, it wasn't the original intention of the Japanese, so why are you pushing your agendas on it?
Yeah, and I think the developers are kind of guilty of this because they never cared that much about the English version. I think that's where the problem comes. But I remember when this game came out.
Sadly, I've seen a lot of that of the Japanese developers not caring too much about it, but that's a topic for a different day. But I have some sad examples about it.
Yeah,
it has consequences. Sorry.
No problem. It's like when I went into the game, I didn't know about any of these things. I didn't know about the gender politics. I didn't know. It was really early. It was like 2014 or something like that. And I didn't know.
So like you had the experience firsthand.
Yeah, so I wasn't even thinking about that. But the game was translated so badly. The dialogue was so cringe that I just didn't like it. I couldn't get into the game. It's just that bad. Because you can't tell me that the dialogue doesn't matter when it's a great part of the story in the exposition.
Yeah, of course it matters.
Yeah, and it gets to a point when you're losing context. I have no idea why I'm after this guy, but suddenly I have to know about his entire gender identification.
Of course.
Yeah, so this guy is a criminal.
That will be important.
Yeah, that guy was a criminal too, so you have to be aware of what you're calling him for, or calling they for. You have to be careful what you're saying about him, even though he's a criminal and you have no idea why you're after him.
I mean, if you're playing
he's a criminal.
If you're playing this game on Canada, you might get arrested if you misgender him. So
yeah, I'm not trying to misgender him. I just have no idea what I'm supposed to call him. I just don't know because the game does the way they go so deep into detail. I get more confused than before.
Exactly.
Because if they just said they and then, I'd be like, okay, it's they then. It's whatever, I don't care. I didn't have to know about their specificity. But when you go into this much, because I'm not
like Outer Wilds, for example.
Yeah, like Outer Wilds. Like you don't know a lot of the genders in that game. It's great. Like Undertale, for example, it's another great game where the main character's gender is very ambiguous. You never find out if it's a male or a female. And you know what? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Exactly.
Story. And you know what? It's okay to call them they, them. It's okay to not assume if they're a man or a woman. I think that's totally, it's up to the player to decide what they identify with. If you're a girl, you can think she's a girl. If you're a man, you can identify him as a boy. I don't think it matters. But when it comes to this, when you're stopping the game and you're having an entire dialogue just trying to explain to me why it's a Z-zer and what these words mean and why you should treat him like this, that's kind of weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
it's a fictional character in a video game.
If you have to explain your made up words, you're doing a bad job, man.
Yeah, and as far as I know, I don't think anyone identifies themselves as Z-zer, because I've met plenty of people that don't identify binarily. They're non-binary, and I've never seen one identifying themselves as Z-zer. Many of them talk to me, and they always identify themselves with their respective gender, whether it's their original gender or the gender they identify with. But I've never seen one go like, you can call me Zer.
I mean, although here we don't have like as much the habit of using pronouns. It's a bit different, like we're more used to treating people by their name.
You mean in our country?
In our
language?
I mean in our country, in our language, yeah.
Yeah, in our language, you're not used to calling people by pronouns.
Yeah, so just giving a bit of context here.
Yeah, but I'm talking about international individuals.
No, international, yeah.
Yeah, like even in our country, I've met some individual like this, and I'll treat them by their name. I'll never try to front them. But when you're talking about international people, I've never had a personal issue with anyone that identifies differently. Yeah, I'll just accept it, because you're being polite to me, you're talking to me, you're saying I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, okay, that's fair. I'm not gonna talk anything. It's whatever you say. But
course.
when you're in a game and you're doing this entire exposition, it's cringe. It's cringe. It's terrible.
It is.
Yeah, you're losing me here.
You're losing subscriber.
Yeah, you're losing subscribers. Yeah, I just wish they were more tactful with these things. Like they had more taste of where to put these things in or how to put them in, or maybe not put them at all. And just
not put them at all. Like, it's the easiest to do. Like, leave those politics out of my games.
Yeah. And
like, if they're on the original version, okay, whatever.
Yeah. A lot of people will argue, and this is a strange argument for me, which is when you're talking about games that are politic in nature, like, for example, I don't know if you ever played any of the Metal Gear games.
I haven't, although I know the reference of all of them, yeah.
A lot of people will claim that Metal Gear is an inherently political game because it talks a lot about the American government and things like that. What people fail to understand is that, first of all, it's the entire plot of the game, right?
Exactly.
So if I decide to play an LGBT dating sim, like there are plenty of those, by the way. There are plenty of dating sims all about gay characters or lesbian characters or non-binary characters. I'm going into the game thinking about that. Like, okay, this game is about this and this is what I want to play, right? So you accept that by default. When you go into a game like Metal Gear, you know it's about the government. You accept it by default. And besides that, we're talking about politics of cloning people and making genetic experiments and giving them superpowers and creating walking nukes. So I think this goes a little bit into fantasy territory, right?
It does, obviously.
Politics. But a lot of people will point at the game. A lot of people will point at the game and say, see, this is a critic of America. And you know what? It might be, but it's part of the lore. It's not just there for being there.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue with movies nowadays. They put things there just for being there, not adding absolutely anything besides taking screen time.
Yeah,
just
because
taking screen time away just to put your message into the movie.
You know why there's no games about Vietnam?
Why?
Because America lost.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Because many people, even Call of Duty, tried to make a third-person Vietnam game, if you can believe it. Like a game about Vietnam.
They tried?
Yeah, they did. And it didn't go anywhere.
Because of the American audience?
Yeah, because of the American audience.
I see.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with you depicting something wrong. And I don't think there's any problem with you making a game about politics. But the game has to be about politics. The game has to be about politics. You can't be playing a game about an android in space and suddenly stop everything to explain to me the nuances of capitalism. Right? Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right.
Because if you want to make a game about capitalism, go ahead. You want to criticize capitalism, go ahead. You want to make a game about communism or criticizing communism, go ahead. I mean,
the game to criticize capitalism already exists. It's called Monopoly.
Exactly.
It's essentially a critic to capitalism.
Yeah,
so.
And you can say that the game is inherently politic. It is.
Yeah.
Right. It's about politics. That's fair. But it's there. You're not trying to fool anybody with it.
Yeah.
Again, if you're trying to shoot aliens in space, or you're trying to do a medieval game, and you suddenly insert modern politics into it, that's weird, right? Because you have plenty of games that are medieval and series and movies about the politics of the medieval times, you know?
Of course.
I don't think there's anything wrong about that. There have been plenty of movies, for example, about how women suffered during medieval times and how the peasants were badly treated, how bad the economy was. And those things make sense in their context, right?
Of course.
You can make a movie about modern politics and talk about them extensively in the movie. And it might
the problem is when they do medieval movies and they try to just insert and force nowadays messages and ideologies into them, which is sadly what happens the most nowadays.
Yeah, and it's not just games either. Like, for example, I don't know if you heard about Gemini. Google AI.
Yeah, I've heard.
Well, then you might know what I'm about to say. That
I probably know, but
you started having issues with with people trying to generate, for example, images of Nazis from Germany from World War II.
Oh, I know that one.
And they generated people from every kind of ethnicity to try and be diverse. And I'm like, no, the Nazis were clearly German, unless you're talking about the Africa Corps. But I don't think you want to depict Africans that were forced into a war as Nazis.
Yeah, like...
Because I think that's pretty distasteful.
That example is absolutely ironic. Like, you want to appeal to diversity so much that you circle right around and put diversity into the bad guys.
Yeah,
like, it's ironic.
Yeah, because if you're trying to depict diversity in America or Europe or whatever, it makes sense, right? Because, again, I'm talking about my own country. There's a lot of diversity here, so it makes sense that you have diverse people. Like, there's not two people in our country that look alike.
Of course.
That's about it. But when you're trying to talk about historical things that happened when it comes to ethnicity, for example, like, you wouldn't want to depict the Indians in Brazil as, like, native Brazilian people as being white, right?
Yeah, of course.
That would probably leave a bad taste in your mouth, because a lot of them are, first of all, a lot of them are still alive and struggling with real issues because of corrupt government in Brazil. And at the same time, they were never white. They had their own ethnicity. And I think it would be disrespectful for them to add that kind of diversity in there.
Of course.
They were also not African. They were not the same as the North American Native Americans. They're not Russian. So it only makes sense to depict them in their specific ethnicity.
But when you flip things around, it certainly becomes acceptable, which shouldn't happen.
But that's the thing. It's not acceptable at all, right? Like, there might be a few people on Twitter saying that it's acceptable, but I think most people would agree that having a Nazi being depicted as a person of Indian descent or Arabian descent or African descent is probably not very tasteful, right? Yeah, I think that's a big issue. And I think games trying to delve into this, they're doing a bad job because they're essentially doing the same as the AI. They're trying to force...
when they portray historical figures as being other races. For example, I think they depicted George Washington as black.
Did they?
They did. The Google Gemini did that.
Oh yeah, Google Gemini, but I'm talking about games and movies.
Oh, no. I was talking about the Google Gemini.
Yeah, I know Google Gemini did that with George Washington. But
George Washington and a lot of other figures. I think they did that with Elon Musk.
Yeah, and George Washington was a slave owner, so that's even worse, right?
Yeah.
So why would you do this? Like, why would you depict someone like this?
It makes some sense.
Yeah, and I think when you try to do that, it's even worse because it's not an AI that's doing it that doesn't know any better, or that it's being programmed to do that. In this case, you're talking about people with actual context trying to depict things that were not meant to be that way, or you're trying to alter the original creator's image of what you're trying to achieve. To send your own message, right?
Yeah. I'm just going to say that someone had to program Google Gemini to be like that, so those kinds of people do exist.
Yeah, but they were never trying to explicitly say that Gemini had to show George Washington as being of African descent, right?
No, what they just put a rule on the system, which was that every generated image has to obey to certain diversity principles. And that's the result.
As far as I know, it's not just the images. I think the answer that you get when you ask them things also go into that kind of detail, and that becomes a big issue in my opinion. But in that case, it's a little less. It's a little less bad, so to say, as having it in the game, because again, when you do that to an AI, you're trying to keep some certain ideas out of it, and I can understand that. There's been a lot of issues when it comes to social bias when you try to make a pure AI, and that might happen for a series of reasons. It might have to do with the kind of data you input into it. I mean, I'm not going to go into the technical details of it, but that's an issue that sometimes you have to have some kind of human oversight to these things. But when you're trying to do it in a game or a movie or a series or an anime, and you're the one deciding that, you're the one having a bad idea. You can't turn around and say, oh, it was the AI.
Yeah, you're the one giving a bad experience to the fans.
Yeah, you're the one saying George Washington was someone else. It's not a computer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a big issue. That's where the issues come from. And I think a lot of people get misrepresented when they try to complain about these things, because there's an instant gut reaction when you try to criticize these people for making this kind of decision. Sometimes people don't want to have politics. It's not that they don't agree with you. It's that they don't want to see this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a gut reaction from the other side trying to say, no, you're wrong and I'm right and you have to accept what I did. And it's like, no, I really don't have to. I really don't have to accept it, because maybe I won't buy the game, or maybe I won't watch the movie.
Exactly, you're voting with your wallet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of big companies are starting to see that. People will always say that it doesn't matter that people will watch anything, but I'm starting to see the opposite happen.
Yeah, you can see like a lot of the more recent Marvel movies, they're really going downhill. Like, for example, nobody watched the Marvels. Just as one example, but besides the Marvels, like the majority of their movies after Endgame, like they're just going downhill because people are absolutely tired of that crap.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with the way you write the characters too, right? Because
it is.
Yeah, when you have a character like, for example, Shang-Chi. I don't know if is it Shang-Chi the name of the character? I think so, right? Yeah, it's Shang-Chi, the Chinese Marvel superhero.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this was supposed to be a Chinese representation movie, because there's not a lot of Chinese of Asian people being casted in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense that you make a movie about China, especially when you have a big market in China, right? I don't think that's a big issue. But it makes sense to cater to that and to have some diversity in your movie. But then, this character has been trained to be an assassin his entire life. And he ran away from this because he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to be an assassin. He tried to run away from his family. And in the middle of the movie, you get introduced to his sister, which has big brother complexes about feeling rejected in her family because she wasn't seen as good as of an assassin because she was a girl. She was born a girl, so she wasn't seen as good of an assassin. And she beats the shit out of the main character. For no reason. There's no context given. He just basically stands there.
Does she like any powers or?
No, she's just really strong as a person.
Oh, okay. So that's typical nowadays Marvel 101.
Yeah, though to be honest, the main character doesn't have any superpowers until the end of the game, at the end of the movie. Like, he's just a really strong person too, except there's no challenge.
I mean, he was going to be an assassin, so I assume that's pretty strong.
Yeah. And while he trained with some trained assassins, she just stood by the window and watched the movements. She did the same in her room, alone.
Oh.
And and so she became strong because of that. And she beats the shit out of him. Like, she completely deletes him. And you start to wonder, if she's that strong, why isn't she the lead character at that point? Like, why not? Why are we having this guy, which is weaker than her? But they had to make him the main character because he was Shang-Chi. There was already a comic book with his name. And this is what I'm trying to say. Like, when you try to make these kind of changes to appeal to certain audiences or certain ideologies, you risk making the entire movie or the entire game look bad. Because suddenly there's a certain disconnect between the plot of what you're seeing and what you're getting. Like, and what you're understanding of it. Because that was my first reaction. Like, this girl, she beats the hell out of the Shang-Chi character. Why isn't she Shang-Chi? I mean, you might as well have casted her as Shang-Chi at that point.
I can tell you why not, because they basically already did more than one time, but more recently they did a series which is Echo. It's about a girl that lost one of her legs and she's deaf. She has a prosthetic leg.
Okay.
And since she was a child, she was already super strong for no reason. Even though she had all those problems, she just beat her colleagues on martial arts. Without any explanation. She doesn't have any power. She's just like that. She doesn't use any specific way to bypass her weakness. Like, for example, we have Daredevil, which is blind. So he uses the other senses and he uses other tactics to fight against that. He is strong, but like he has to use statics to complement that. No, this one is just strong. She could have like a normal limb, and she could be not deaf, and it would be pretty much the same. You're not adding absolutely anything to that.
Yeah,
that's weird. That's why I'm saying I know why they're not doing her the main character on the movie that you said, because they did it with this one, and like, yeah, it's another flop, as you might have guessed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about this one because I've never heard about it. Mm-hmm. It's probably as good as it is, right? That I never heard about this.
Yeah, it's probably as good as it is.
I can tell you from the perspective of a martial artist that not having a leg is a huge issue when you're trying to fight.
Like, okay, she has a prosthetic leg, but it's not even prosthetic on the level of Tony Stark. It's those basic prosthetics.
Yeah, but it's up to the knee, right? So she has at least the knee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that makes it a little easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but still, it's probably not easy to fight with this. I'm looking at it and it looks pretty bad to fight with.
And she beats everyone, male, female, black belt, just beats everyone.
I guess she was just born that strong, eh?
Yeah, for sure. My God.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens when they're trying to do what they call typecasting, which is trying to get like specific people that look a specific way to put into a certain role. So yeah, I feel like this is the kind of thing you're trying to do to appeal to a certain audience. And I don't think this works that well. Especially when there's no lore to back it up. Was she like this on the comics? Because I have no idea.
Good question. I haven't even heard about the comics, so they might be as good as the series.
Yeah, because I heard
but in the series, she's basically just a Mary Sue.
Yeah, because I've heard there are issues with the comic books as well, like the Marvel comic books. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, or that they might have made her look even better in the movie than she looks in the comic books. Like make her a lot stronger.
Kind of difficult. Like she basically fights everyone, even people with guns, which they don't use the gun. They're just like they are pointing the gun.
Yeah,
and she just goes into melee range and beats them. One by one, by the way. The others just stand around looking.
Yeah,
so it's as good as you might imagine.
When I look up about the character herself, it seems that her only issue was that she couldn't hear. She was deaf.
Yeah.
So she used American Sign Language to communicate. And she's from a Native American tribe.
That part I don't know. I know that at least in the series she's the daughter of Kingpin.
But as far as I know, in her original version, she trained a lot her entire life. She had a really bad upbringing, like she had a bad childhood. She was trained to take on the Daredevil.
Yeah, because like I said, she's the daughter of Kingpin.
Yeah, exactly. She's the adopted daughter, as far as I know. Yeah, exactly. It's the adopted daughter
yeah.
Kingpin. And it doesn't look like she loses a leg. It looks like she has both legs intact. So it seems like that was very add-on. It says here, powers and abilities. Maya Lopez is an Olympic-level athlete, which makes sense, right? If she's going to be fighting someone like Daredevil.
Yeah.
She possesses photographic reflexes, or the uncanny ability to perfectly copy other people's movements. So that's pretty good, actually. That makes sense that she's strong. While watching other people, she has become a concert-level pianist, a strong martial artist, a highly skilled acrobat, and a gifted ballerina. And on one occasion, even piloted a Quinjet for a few minutes. A Quinjet, in case you don't know, is an aircraft.
As you can see, she's pretty much a Mary Sue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense in a Marvel movie, don't you think? Like, or in a Marvel comic book. Like, you're already talking about people with super strength. And some of these people are super intelligent, like
but
Mr. Fantastic.
That's the thing. At least in the series, she has no powers.
I mean, she doesn't have any powers either here. She just has the ability to perfectly copy other people's movements. It's just a natural ability, and I think there are some people in real life that can do some very similar things. So I don't think I don't think the comic book version is a Mary Sue, unless you want to consider every superhero a Mary Sue or a.
No, the comic book version, I don't know. I'm talking about the series version.
Yeah. So I think that might be the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be.
Like in the way that they explain in the series is like,
it says here that
she's just pretty talented from young. I mean, okay, that's fair, but there's only up to a point that talent will take you. In her case, even besides the disabilities, like fighting against male characters and black belts and guys with guns and whatever, it's already kind of stupid.
It says here that she's only depicted as an amputee in the series.
Oh, it's possible.
Yeah, so it seems that part was added on completely unnecessarily. So
it is completely unnecessary because
they're just making an already really strong character even stronger for no reason, or make her backstory
like I told you, they basically do nothing with that. Okay, yeah, she's an
amputee, but it doesn't change anything.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You gotta have the superpower.
Except in a stupid scene where some guys tie her up upside down, and they tie her up by the prosthetic leg, and she gets free just by releasing the prosthetic leg.
Man, that sounds like a stupid villain.
Oh, they're completely stupid. They tie her up into a warehouse full of tools. After she gets free, they're afraid of her and they just lock the door, and she just goes full MacGyver and builds up stuff to escape. They have guns, but they don't use them.
Yeah, even though it's like she's not supposed to be super intelligent. She's just super capable herself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's also Ronin. She becomes Ronin at some point in the New Avengers comic book. So she was the original Ronin. She was the first one to become Ronin. So, it's like the ninja one, the girl that walks around with samurai swords and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes sense, right? If she's that strong. I don't think there's an issue with her being strong. I think it's weird that every single female character and sometimes male characters who have to be able to MacGyver everything. Like they can suddenly build everything and get out of any situation with a ludicrous way. Like, I can just mix up these 2 things and suddenly I have a weapon. It's weird, right?
It is.
Sometimes the simplest you can make it is the better. And I think when you're going into that level of detail, when you're trying to make everything like that, it loses a little bit of the magic, so to say. Sometimes it's better to just have her kicking ass,
True. I mean, since they've already made her that strong, I mean, at that point, might just...
As I always say to people, because sometimes people, when I criticize something in a plot or a game or a movie, people will just tell me, this is how the character was written by the writers themselves. As in, when you're making a movie, you write the script, and you put the characters in those situations. It's like, how else would she do this? And I'm thinking, well, the writers had all the power in the world to make her however they wanted it to be.
Yeah,
and they still made
the
it
writer's
this way.
job.
And they put her in this situation. They had all the power to make it however they saw fit, right? Because they're the god of the world. They're the ones writing the rules. And they made her specifically like this. So that's a writer's issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big issue. Because you already have I don't know if you ever saw the movie Elektra.
I haven't. But I heard good things back then, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. That movie is pretty good, but you could just say the same about Elektra. You could just say she's super strong for no reason other than being strong, but you don't need a big reason to be strong. You can just be naturally gifted. I don't think that's an issue. It becomes an issue when you suddenly have all the good qualities of a character ever and none of the downfalls.
Yep. That's the biggest issue with Captain Marvel, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, at that point, you're just so powerful that the rest of the Avengers are like, what are they doing there at that point?
Yeah, but as far as I know, she didn't do much in Endgame, right? She was just...
No, she didn't. She just got punched by Thanos.
Yeah, she was just there like, hey, I'm here. I also appear in this movie.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about her. I had no backstory for her because I didn't watch the
her movie,
movie. Yeah. For no reason other than I only watched the main series of the Marvel movies. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. I don't know if you want to say anything else about this topic, but I think we've went way off tracks.
I think it was a pretty good conversation. I think we've went over all of this stuff. Thank you, Alex, for having you here. I really appreciated this conversation. Thank you all, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.